All right, does that work? It works. Hello. Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Dr. Alex Munoz. I'm the co-founder and CEO of NorCal Ventures. We invest in local businesses and use technology and AI to optimize business processes and hopefully revolutionize the fast casual industry. And next to me I have, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, this works.
This one doesn't work.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on the panel, Alex, and it's so nice to be sitting here with you and such esteemed panel members here. Lots of experience. My name is M.K. Shadman, and I am currently the chair of the advisory board at Viva Valley. I'm also CEO of Housing and COO of Royal Emerald Pharmaceuticals. I do merger acquisitions and I do real estate development. I'm a CCIM, CPM, and MRICS. And so that's what I do, and life is busy.
My name is Ray Ferranti. I am the CFO and CCO of DXD Capital, which is a private equity real estate development fund. We build storage facilities across the U.S., as far east as Nantucket and as far west as Maui. So that's where I cover.
Excellent. Excellent. So let me get right into it. So we have a couple topics we want to talk about because I think they're all very applicable to adapting business models. And the first question I have is circling around data-driven research. And this is for you, Ray. So why is data-driven research necessary when adapting business models for diverse markets?
So understanding your market is the first critical step in being successful. And the only way that we can do that is through the data. People often have emotion. They think they know what's happening, and then they try to execute on a plan, and it fails. And they don't understand why they fail. But if they took a minute to understand the demographics of the market, the patterns of how their end users are moving through that market, they can bring a much better product that is proven already to be successful because they know that they're going to have that presence. It's not guessing on, are they going to show up at this store? Are they going to use a 10 by 10 unit or a 5 by 5 unit in the storage space? I know what units sell because I can see in the demographic which is the most popular and charges the highest rent. And so I can understand very easily what product to bring to them to be successful. And I think that it's always changing. You always have to reevaluate those things, and you always have to be adaptive. And having the machine feed you that information is the most successful way to do that.
I think you brought up a good point when you mentioned 10 by 10 and 5 by 5 units. I think that's really adapting to the local market and the realities of your business, what you're doing, by saying, you know what, I'm going to sell what I can make the most money with, but you know that only because you have access to the data, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. We underwrite models, and we have an idea on day one before we even build the facility, and then you build it, and some other person comes in and builds one right next door to you, and you're going, wow, how am I going to get my capacity up? How am I going to get to the right rental rates and still be successful because I have a bank that underwrote me and I have debt to pay and I have investors that I have, marketed to them a certain return and that I want to achieve. That proves my success as a manager. And so when that happens, if you have the data and you're able to understand it, I can say, wow, my 10 by 10s are charging at a premium, and around, the 5 stores within my 5-mile radius, they don't have those available. But there are plenty of 5 by 5s, and those are not moving off the shelf. Well, why? What should I do? Well, I should simply take down a wall and convert a 5 by 5 to a 10 by 10. Now I have more product. I can charge a higher rate because I know that they don't have, there is no supply in that market. And now I've recaptured what could have been a problem, and now I'm back on track to meet those performance metrics, to meet my ratios for the bank, so that they don't get skittish on their lending capacity with me, right? And so, having that model, having that data, understanding how to apply that in your actual investment or your strategy or your business is very critical.
What I found is that the more access you have to data, or the more data you have, the more difficult it becomes to actually interpret the data, because sometimes it's conflicting, right? And the data sources do not match. So especially if you work with data brokers, quite often their data is inaccurate, is not timely, is delayed, or is just inconsistent throughout. What did you find to be one of the biggest challenges when looking at all this data, and how do you filter what's relevant to your business in particular?
It's really the expertise of the human behind it, right? And so having the correct analysts that understand what are the key drivers of the business. Is it occupancy, or is it rates, or is it the type of units that are selling? There is a control process that you have to normalize that data. You have to look for the exceptions, and you have to clean it. Otherwise, it's sort of like AI learning, right? If you put something in, it'll iteratively learn the wrong thing. And so, having that feedback loop with somebody that has gone through the process, that understands what's the true driver of the model, is I think the most important piece. So having the right team and the right people to analyze that data, make it all worth it.
Great, and I agree. Being able to interpret the data and making sense of it is the most important thing. And I want to direct this next question to you, MK, because we talked about it earlier, and you recently had a project where you used data and actual information from that location to tailor what you're going to do with that project, whether that's going to be, a 5-star resort or something else. And what was that process? What was going through your mind, and why did you rely on the data? What was the driving factor?
The question about data is so critical, to your point. Not only the fact that we have to have the right analyst to understand what it means, to also understand where the source of data is. The best example is all the data that we had for the election results, and they all were very, very complicated and often inaccurate. The human connection, the community involvement, and everything else impacts the data as well. So we can't just take the data as raw as it is. We really have to analyze it, dissect it, find out where the sources of the data is, and then readjust it to what we want to have. In my development process, we have to adapt not only the data that we get, but the subsequent policies that come in, the use that is adapted to it, and how the community reacts. And so it's very critical. One of the things that we do is asset management. And I have really come to the belief that as an asset manager, you are sort of like that brand chief officer, that you have to embrace everything. You have to understand risk. You have to understand how to analyze your data and then make your decisions not in a passive way where you can say, I have a passive income, I just put $10, $20 million, I'm going to just take my check, but actually be involved in policy decisions, in community involvement, in making sure you have all kind of connection where you have your investment, because someone said something really interesting this morning, and I think that was you. When we do real estate development, we cannot pick up our property and just take it somewhere else. So we are part of that community. We have to be involved. So no matter what data tells you, data can change swiftly when policy changes, when community changes, and we have to be adapted to that. So yes, in that one area where we found this beautiful piece of property, and on a a large parcel, and they had entitlements for a large resort. And I thought that was the most stupid thing to do because you had the railroad running behind it, you had the freeway. I mean, this is extreme, the best example of exposure, signage, and everything else, but not a resort. Who wants to have an enjoying weekend next to the train station, correct? And the running of this Caltran. So we started looking at the property. It was on the market for about 4 years. So that's the beautiful area of data. We knew we had the data that was sitting in the market. The use was wrong. And then we went to the city, we did data analysis, and we found that storage was the best thing to do because of the expansion in the area. And
so now we're going to work together.
Now we're going to work together. So that is the best thing, to understand the data and don't rely on their current entitlement. They may not be correct. They may have taken the data that's wrong.
Do you want to add anything, Ray? If not, then I will.
No, you can move on.
Okay, excellent. So you just mentioned the community and being part of the community and actually trying to influence policy, right? So you go in there, you realize certain things are certain ways, and you want to change some of those things. So that's what data gives you, right? Data lets you know, okay, this is my demographic makeup. This is what the rules are. These are the congressmen or women I have to talk to, or city council members I have to talk to make certain changes that would help the community and improve, things. So how can communities differ, and what factors are at play?
Excellent question, and actually a really tricky one. As developers, working with the municipalities, working with council members, mayors, and staff, we really have to understand that staff is there to help us. The representatives are there to help their constituents, but we have to walk the fine line that we are there to do a development to help the community and do not engage into any kind of a corruption in any level. Do not try to speed the process. Make sure that you are actually doing something good for the community, understand the need, but do not cross the line in any way, shape, or form. And I do developments in Oakland, and as you may know, the mayor got recalled and the FBI indicted her. And not only that, the district attorney got recalled. And down the hall from us, or down the bridge from us in San Francisco, Mayor London Breed was not reelected. So we face a lot of policy issues, a lot of claimed corruption. But I can tell you, in one instant, I was offered to pay $2.5 million, and my project would have been purchased for a very high price, and I walked away. And recently, I also asked the city of Oakland to move out of one of my buildings because of the poor human service management. And we decided that we would pass on $5 million annual income, but we will not be part of a slumlord community. That is a choice we make as developers. And I think that I encourage everyone to make sure that you never bend your ethics. You never do that, but be part of the community, give back. So we are now, instead of being a passive, we are now active. We have now been engaged to make sure that we offer services that would help the community. That's my message. Keep your ethics up. Be involved. Be at the table, not on the menu. Make sure that you talk. Speak up, but be very ethical.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences. Storage is not the prettiest piece of real estate. We make boxes inside of boxes, right? And so oftentimes we're faced with an outreach from the community that they don't want the storage facility there because it's an eyesore and it's going to ruin the motif of the town. And so this is where the human element is very critical in the process. Sending one of our developers to a town hall meeting to ensure that the design of the building is going to fit the motif of the town. We built a facility in Bristol, Rhode Island, And if any one of you ever drove past it, you would think that they were townhouses. That's how pretty the building is. And it sits right in the middle of the town, and you wouldn't know the difference, other than the sign that says extra space on it. So, that's an adaptive thing that we did so that we gave back to the community and said, we're not going to put the eyesore there. Additionally, they're big parcels of land, so what could we do? We've built 2 daycare facilities on our land just because that helps the project get through. So I love the ethics, and I love holding your ground. Instead of bending, adapt to what they're looking for, right? So give back to the community, and it's still a good business model for us. And more people will use it because they see that you're not the bad developer coming in to just change everything and skim the money off the top. So just a couple examples.
I love to add to that bad developer. How many times do we get attacked? And it's like we put all our life savings into developing in areas that oftentimes we're not even supported by lenders. And here, we've always been attacked, a greedy developer. We pay property taxes, but they decide to put an encampment on your sidewalk and, poop on the door, and then we have poop officers. But we are the bad developers. I mean, it's insane. But we really go through these ups and downs, and we survive, and we adapt, and we are part of the community. And if it was not for the developers who would put their life savings into this thing and put their experience into all of this and analyze data, and like what Steve Jobs said, we bring products to the market that they don't even know that they need it. But then after it's there, they're like, oh, that was a good idea. Communal living, senior housing, adaptable housing, adjusting everything for our aging population. Nobody was thinking, it's the developers that are thinking. So
I like the example where you said the repurpose.
Yeah.
Tell that story.
Oh, yeah, it's really the repurpose, correct?
Yeah.
So you're changing walls from 10 to 20 or 30. What do we do? If you have an ADA, change the bathrooms, change the doors, change everything so that you have more ADA compliant units. You have to adapt to the use. You have to adapt to what the community needs. If you have more student housing need, change them, make them smaller. But you can change the buildings within the envelope. That's okay. So obsolescence in real estate is a reality. As asset managers, we have to be vigilant. We have to be sharp. We have to be involved, and we have to make sure we change it in a timely fashion. Otherwise, it would be empty boxes. Retail has suffocated us, not because we built wrong, because the policies were bad, because they lost so much money that they just had to leave. So how do we adapt to that? It's to find out that maybe within that envelope, we can build a storage. Maybe within that envelope, we can build a mental health or student housing or senior housing. So we just have to be always, ready and be willing to work with the community.
I think you both made great points here. It's in order to stay competitive and have a sustainable business model, you need to constantly adapt, and you have to have that mindset and culture of adaptation and change. Right? Without change management, you will just fall behind. And you mentioned the facade of the building, and then adding some daycare facilities to accelerate what your goals are, right. Building a storage facility, right? And that is adapting to the local needs of the community and the local market by offering pretty much the same business model, but the product is slightly different, right? And we see this with global brands as well. For example, you go to McDonald's here, you have a certain, collection of items on the menu, and you go to Asia and you will find rice, and you'll find fried chicken, and you'll find all kinds of other things. So global brands, globally operating businesses, organizations, they continue to adapt to local markets, and they have been doing that for many, many years. But what's interesting is that more localized businesses, like that operate within states or across state lines, or just in the United States, for example, they also keep doing this now, because cultural differences, demographic differences can really make a big difference. For example, assuming you go into a market where the average household income is low, you will have to adapt your product. You're not going to open a Louis Vuitton or a Gucci store maybe, right in the middle of a low-income area, that project will likely fail. But a different brand, maybe an outlet, might work just fine. And so, these are the things that we need to think about, where data can help us, where we can see who is going where, how much time do they spend there, how much money do they have, how often do they come back? Do they go to a restaurant to eat before they go to the movie theater? Which restaurant do they go to? Do they go to a restaurant after they go to the movie theater? Which restaurant is that? Do they go to Home Depot before they go to the movie theater? These are all things that data can tell us and help us make better decisions, not only to where to put our businesses and operations, but how to adapt them to the local markets. And one thing is that I want to ask you, Ray, is there a risk of over-customization? And what operational challenges might come with the whole customization adaptation process?
Yeah, I mean, there is a balance, right? I think that you're trying to customize it to get the best result, but from an operational standpoint, you want the recurring nature of how you're doing things. And, that just creates less overhead on the back end, right? Because you have standard operating procedures, you can have a very consistent product because you can normalize that across the platform. But the customization side of it, and in my case, the way that we built the building, it made that product successful there, right? And so you do want to do it within the bandwidth of reason. I think that's the best way to say it. MK, we were talking about air controlled, grade A storage with air conditioning. Okay, we built 3 facilities here in Vegas. They all have air conditioning because it gets hot here. Okay, we built a facility in Hawaii. They don't pay extra for AC units. Why? Because they're all commercial businesses that are landscaping. They want drive-ups. They want to open the garage. They want to grab their equipment. They want to leave. So if I spend the extra money on AC, I'm going to have more overhead. I'm going to have a higher rate because I now have more overhead, and I'm going to have nobody that wants to pay that because in Hawaii it just doesn't exist. So you customize to that market. You brought up data and tracking people and understanding that. And we've talked about it before. We both use an AI platform called Placer, right? How do we use Placer data? We're tracking, we're all walking around with homing devices in our pockets, right? It knows where we're going all the time. It knows where we stop, how long we stop there, where we go next, right? It's perfect what you were alluding to. And what does that tell me? Well, it tells me when I put that on a map next to a facility that I built, I think my trade market is a 3-mile radius, but people are driving 10 miles to my store. Wow, that just opened up the whole, 5 more miles of what I can do or how I can model that. Should I start marketing further away from my facility? I didn't know that people were driving that far for storage because I thought it's as close as to the house. But they go to Home Depot every 2 weeks for something. They stop at the storage facility. Or it's right off the highway. So on the way home, I stop and then I go to my house, right? You're trying to track people's tendencies and the data exists. So how do you get that? And then how do you incorporate that into your model to make the decision quicker to say, how should I spend my dollars? And that's where, that's where the customization balance lies.
I think that's a great point. The balance is important, right? And obviously, you want to realize economies of scale. So you have, in your case, multiple storage facilities. You want to have the operational part pretty much dialed in so that you can hire one person doing X for all facilities instead of hiring 10 different people doing maybe for 3 facilities and so on. And the risk here is if you over-customize, it breaks your back end essentially, right? It erases all your operational efficiencies. And so you end up spending more money and you have to recalculate, how you're going to design your product and, what are your profit margins and so on. So, and especially like in the restaurant business, for example, that's a big thing, right? Because you can have economies of scale if you have the same product across all markets. But if they all of a sudden have a different sauce, you have to find a different provider for the sauce. And how are you going to source that? And then he's like, well, you only have 2 stores, and that's going to cost you, you have to buy, I don't know how many hundreds of gallons. And so these are the challenges that come with customization, I guess. And if it's just a facade, I think that's like
right. But there is some opportunity, because if you couldn't otherwise get into that market because of the customization, well, then it's worth it, right? Especially if you're able to do it, you know how hard it is for the next guy. And so now you have a head start. You can get to market first, and in some instances, you can corner that market, right? I mean, we're building on Nantucket Island in Massachusetts. It's only 3 miles wide, right? But we're putting a storage facility there. Why? Because people don't want to bring their stuff across on the ferry all the time. But it's also zoned. There can only be one. It's not big enough to put another, and they won't allow it. And we had to customize the building to meet the Nantucket requirement, right? It has to fit in, otherwise they wouldn't, pass the permitting process. So, that was worth the effort, and that's part of the decision-making process that you have to be ready to make.
So I think there's another angle to your question too, and that is when customization is required. For example, when we develop retail, and you said in some cases you can do high-end, and in some cases actually an outlet is better. But when you do this type of customization, it's a necessity to that development. So what do we do to secure our position is limitations on radius competition, correct? Right. So we basically say, you're writing a lease with me, you're not opening another shop, down the street. So now that radius is what protects the property owners and the rental income that we bring in. So, understanding the data and understanding that what is the dollar amount that the community can spend in one area allows us to pinpoint where we want to put the retail, but then we protect ourselves by writing these leases that they can't go and do another one. A very good example of this is in the city of San Jose, where Santana Row has all this, with Valley Fair, has all these protection, and the city of San Jose could never pick up retail because nobody could open another retail center there. So these are things that we do as developers. To your point, customization sometimes has a different angle to it too. And because we actually own restaurant chains and club chains, we also understand that as well, that in some areas, you actually want to have multiple clubs on one street because people love to do club hopping. So that's where you do not want to have a limitation. You want to say, let everybody bring club here. Let all the jewelers be on 7th Avenue, correct? So this is a very interesting part that as developers, if we work together, we can actually drive a much better, aggressive returns on our investments.
It's a smaller percentage, but a bigger pie.
Bigger pie.
So.
Yeah.
That was very good. That leads me perfectly. It's a nice segue into our last section on operational leadership challenges that come with finding and adapting to diverse markets. And I think with organizations that operate globally, so some of the developers that we work with, they are not in the United States, so there's a time difference. Obviously, there's a language barrier, and it kind of creates pain points throughout the entire process. Not only, sometimes it sounds really good. Yeah, while I'm sleeping, they're working. And while they're sleeping, I'm working. That sounds very efficient. The problem is you can never really talk to each other because one party is always sleeping. And so that, creates some operational challenges. And my question to you, Ray, is so how can leaders foster an inclusive work environment, especially when you're spread out across the country or even countries?
Sure. So I do payroll in 10 states. We're a company with 27 people. So I have a lot of people scattered from California all the way to Rhode Island. And I think that, having a centralized communication tool is very important, and being organized in that communication tool. We are currently developing 7 properties at this current point, and we have 21 that are operating. And then we have another 15 in the pipeline that we're building in the next 8 months. So how do we do that? We segregate the conversation to keep everything about that project within the umbrella of that dialogue. And so the developer is in there, the lawyer is in there, the finance person is in there, the asset manager is there. And so they get to travel along the journey in the communication, not when their time starts. It's from the beginning, so they have the history of that, and then we also have the ability to recall that and say, oh, I forgot what happened on the Hawaii project. Let me go back and look, right? And so I think that communicating, to your point, is that it doesn't always have to be face-to-face, but how do you keep track of the handoffs? We have checklists. Like, I'm a big checklist person because I'm an accountant and, OCD possibly, but it's, did you do the things that are required for the next step? And then you are going to assert that you did them so that I have trust that it happened, you're acknowledging it, and then I can move forward with my portion of that task, right? And it is a challenge, but we regroup multiple times during the year in person because that face-to-face, nothing will ever beat that. But that's, it all boils down to communication, especially in the development process, because there are so many moving pieces from the beginning and the entitlements all the way through to the sale. So it is a challenge, but you have to actively address the challenge. It doesn't just work.
Yeah, well, what I would say is like efficient project management goes a long way, especially when you're building things out. But it doesn't stop there, right? So for you guys, you also operate them. You're not just building them and then walk away, but you operate them. And I think then, the ongoing communication, being able to look back in the past is really important.
100%. I mean, we use a product called DealPath. It's a property, project management tool. It tracks everything along the way. That is in conjunction with the communication tools that we have. And then it's other platforms to create the transparency of the data, right? So I'm in the back. I'm the last seat in the house, so I get everybody's garbage, and then I clean it up, and then I have to figure out how to present it to them, right? And so this is where, and I talked about it on the last panel, a data warehouse that has a single source of truth of the data, right? That is something that I hold true to my heart, because don't ask me the same question 10 times about the same piece of data that I then have to validate whether or not it's true or not. If I put it there, I have a process that's controlled and I know it's right, and now it's for sharing. What do I do with that data warehouse? Well, I put a bot right on top of it. So don't ask me, ask the bot. He's much faster at finding it. What is the current loan balance on the Hawaii property? Boom, $8 million. What is the current interest rate for it? 7%. Great, thank you. Right? So it's how do you incorporate those tools, but it all starts from that infrastructure and that control around the back end of the data, so that way, people can rely on it.
I have a comment. Okay, so I feel like every time I have a comment that's a little bit of a controversial comment. So here, my fellow CEOs and COOs, and some of them sitting right here in this room, they're from all over the world. But one thing we have in common, they're 90% female. And you know what? We don't sleep as much as you guys do. We raise kids. And we learn to be awake and multitask all the time.
This is true. I will confirm it.
So when I send a text at 2 a.m., I get a response. If I wake up at 4 a.m. and I'm on a Zoom, I'm on a Zoom. And I see all the ladies, you're agreeing to this. Women power, come on. I mean, we really work 24/7. And I have not had a communication problem at all. And there is there is another company that I'm working with called Orbis Pay. And we pay companies, we pay advanced social impact investment, where you can actually take your money, not a loan, but when you work real time, you can take your money. We have an opportunity to send push notifications. So we keep in contact with all of our team. But I got to say thank you for all the women CEOs, CFOs, and C-class, and everyone that works in the industry. You guys rock. Thank you.
You make a really good point, and I want to add to it because there's push and there's pull. There's push and pull within any relationship and within any communication. And so what I have found being the sole member of DXD in New York is that I'm always pulling and then I push because there is no water cooler. I don't get the benefit of going to get a coffee, seeing Joe and saying, oh, I was just working on this thing. You have any ideas, right? So how do I get that collaborative nature through an online presence when somebody's in New Mexico and I'm in New York? Well, sometimes, and it's kind of funny, but sometimes I turn my Zoom on and I just work. And so that's my open door policy. And so they know if they just join my standard Zoom, I'll be on and they can work. We don't even have to talk to each other, I'll simply fire off a question, or they will, and then you get this active learning and this knowledge share because it doesn't exist if you're not in the same building all the time. And so, you have to adapt to that and understand how your organization is set up and how do you transfer that knowledge to make the best decisions throughout the chain of.
I totally agree with you. And one of the things we did at Royal Emerald was we were working with scientists in Turkey. So very different hours. And now we're researching cannabis. This is a federally licensed organization. So we're researching on new medical products that infused science that was in Turkey with research in the United States. So what I came up with is I had screens everywhere, live streaming to Turkey, to Yeditepe University, 24/7. They could see us, we could see them, and it was fantastic. So just
and it creates culture.
Create culture,
yeah.
Absolutely. But then nothing is like getting together to be able to, break bread and all of that.
That's why you come here.
That's why you come here. There you go.
Yeah, those are great tools for fostering a sense of belonging, right, and knowing each other, and it's the digital version of the water cooler, essentially, right? Where you can just walk in and say, or open, door policy for your office. So I have one last question because we're going to run out of time here, but that's for you, MK. So, what operational challenges arise when adapting the business models?
Operational challenges. Oh my goodness. I think the biggest challenge is when you are not in control of the operator or the use, because you literally have to review the damages that are causing in your properties. So operational challenges can be in many different factors. Okay, let me see. You have real estate, then you have in manufacturing, then you have in your retail operation or data centers. The biggest is communication, which we touch base. I think with augmented reality and all the new digital tools and AI, we can manage that. There's so much happening. I mean, I think a long time ago with CCIM, I said, if you don't invest in augmented reality, if you don't invest in virtual reality, if you're going to fail, we're going to be behind. And everybody laughed. Today, they're not laughing. So I think the operational challenge is communication, number one, keeping in contact with your asset and understanding your profit and loss. Thank you to the CFOs to keep us really, I have to see my balance sheet all the time. And also having enough reserves so that when you have policy changes, when you have massive trade things that happen to you, and all of a sudden you're going to say, oh my God, the price of concrete, steel, and everything is going to go up. My next project is going to be a disaster. Did I account for all of this? Did anyone tell us? We didn't get heads up. So now, the ones that are smaller developers, smaller people like me, we never got any memo. But the ones that were in the meeting, they probably got all the stocks and they're already ahead of everything. But these are operational challenges that policy changes, from smaller level to higher level impacts you. And then you have to have enough reserves to weather the changes. I can talk about this for an hour. I'm not going to do it.
I think it's an excellent point because the operational challenge is the unknown. And in real estate development, there's always an unknown. It's when will the unknown show up? So having the contingency, the reserves, having the data available so that you can potentially see the storm coming and be proactive, another huge selling point there, right? You can't answer how do you do it or what are they because they're all over the place and they keep coming. And so it's having the right people looking at, first of all, having a presence, being there, understanding what's happening, constantly reviewing the market, re-underwriting the deals so that they understand how it's moving, understanding the financials and the actual results versus what you originally modeled so that you can, see how you're doing. And then having the cash liquidity to adapt to that change because it always costs money. And so you brought up the steel prices and the concrete. If you're looking ahead and you have the data to understand that where were we in 2020, where are we now, what are the policies, what are the tariffs that they're potentially talking about, we're buying steel and we're storing it. Right? We're a storage company storing steel because we know that the next 6 projects are coming. We also know how much steel we need to buy. So now we're buying a storage yard for the steel to build the storage facility. And so that's us being proactive so that way we can curtail our costs and not get run over and still make the returns because we're selling a product of the investment. And so as the fiduciary, it is our job to stay in the budget that we sold. And so that's a challenge.
That is a challenge. And I wanted to add the operational challenge that you're saying. I touched base on commodities and hard asset. But as I was just thinking, at Viva Valet, the operational challenge became something very interesting. And I can talk about it because I'm over 60, okay? So, sometimes our kids think that they know better than we do. They forget that when the phone was rotary, we knew how to use it, and we were the ones who developed the touch and now the voice command. So our generation is actually pretty darn smart. And we realize that it's not always the fact that they should make the choices for us if we want to live in our home or if we want to have an extended time in our place. We make the choices for ourselves. So that operational change of adapting how we need to go to the market is another challenge that in every business we have to be very vigilant and very aware that we have to listen to our customers and we have to make sure that we understand what they want, not what you think as a young Silicon Valley, guru is always going to work. Listen to your elders too. It works.
And the data proves it. The data proves it. So.
I mean, you and I are obviously data guys here, so we love data, but I see data and technology as risk mitigation tools. Because the more you know, the more you can react and the more you can be proactive about whatever business model you're working on, whatever industry you're in. So I want to thank you both for being here today with me. And it was very enlightening and love talking to you guys. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well. So thank you all and have a nice day.